Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm JJ Flizanes, your host and producer. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today, we're going to talk about Radical Remission. It's a book called Radical Remission by Dr. Kelly Turner. And today I have on Tara Flanagan. She is the director of content for the Radical Remission Project. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to do one more shout out to anyone who's still out there who might be on the edge of thinking they want to do what I do. My Empowerment Strategist beta certification starts in April, but I believe I only have 1 or 2 slots left. So if you're on the edge of thinking you want to be a part of this, I would definitely recommend you fill out an application. It costs nothing to apply and to have a conversation about whether it's the right fit for you and I. You can go to jjflizanes.com/cert, that's CERT, to apply. And guys, just to give you an understanding of how often I create things on this show, when you want to go to my website, you're not going to find any of this, which is why I repeat it multiple times and I put it here in the show notes. So if you hear something that I say and I'm directing you to a website, the likelihood is you can't just go to my website and find it, because I create a lot of things and it would be really hard to keep up with building a new page on the site every time. So check the show notes if you need to follow the link if you don't remember or write it down. So it's jjflizanes.com/cert. And this is the last week to sign up for the Inner Circle membership at $9.99. And after that, the price goes up to $14.99 a month. And that's jjflizanes.com/inner circle. This conversation was the first one that Tara and I had, and after we stopped recording, I asked her some more personal questions about the topics that we discussed, and have decided to do another show and go a little deeper on some issues that were interesting to me and something she's been working on. So Tara will be back. Tara Flanagan discovered Radical Remission during the course of her treatment for stage 4 breast cancer. She felt so empowered reading survivors' healing stories presented by Dr. Kelly Turner, and was certain that implementing the healing factors uncovered by the Radical Remission research is the key to both treating and preventing cancer. It is her hope that someday oncologists will be handing copies of Radical Remission and Radical Hope to every patient who receives a cancer diagnosis, and that the science behind the research will encourage Western medicine to take a closer look at the mind-body-spirit connection. Welcome, Tara, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, JJ.
So first, let's talk about your relationship to the Radical Remission group and the project.
Sure, absolutely. I discovered Radical Remission a couple of years ago. It was actually about 1.5 years after my diagnosis of stage 4 breast cancer. And to go back just a little bit before that, I had lost my only sibling, my sister, to cancer about 15 years ago, a very, very aggressive cancer. And 15 years ago, times were very different. You didn't quite have the plethora of resources in the mind, body, spirit world that we have nowadays. And I remember after her diagnosis, just sort of feeling very helpless, that all I could really do was sort of watch her die. And it was so heartbreaking to me. And here and there, I would hear about, there's such things as energy healers or, acupuncture, but there just didn't seem to be, quite the resources that we have today. And so fast forward to my diagnosis, and, straight away, I was very fortunate that I had a friend who recommended a Chinese energy healer and got me on some supplements and all of the things that, can really help you while you're doing conventional medicine or anything else. So I intuitively was doing many of the things that Dr. Turner found in her research. But it wasn't until a friend recommended that I watch the Heal documentary on Netflix that I realized just how incredible the resources that were out there were. And after watching the Heal documentary, there were 3 presenters that really stood out to me. And those presenters were Dr. Joe Dispenza, Anita Moorjani, and Dr. Kelly Turner. And after watching that, I immediately ordered each of their books. I know they have many books, but I ordered Dying to Be Me, You Are the Placebo, and Radical Remission. And when I read Radical Remission, the only way I can explain it is it felt like I had been hit by a bolt of lightning. all of a sudden, I realized that I am a player in this game. I am not just someone who sits on the sidelines and, does a little bit here and does a little bit there and follows what my oncologist said, that I really have to essentially, as Dr. Turner says in the book, become the CEO of my body. And so after reading that book, I couldn't have been more motivated and inspired by all of the radical remission healing survivor stories. And while I always felt that I was going to survive this, I have to say the book just absolutely gave me sort of the backbone, or I'm not sure what the right word is, the strength to say, okay, not only do I feel I can do this intuitively, but there's also some science on my side as well. So after reading the book, I did a little bit more research on radical remission, and I discovered that there was a local workshop happening in New York. And then upon registering for that workshop, I discovered that there was also a teacher training for those that love the research and want to go out and spread the word. So in addition to signing up for the workshop just as a participant, which anybody can do, I also signed up for the teacher training. And that was when I had the opportunity to meet Kelly Turner and her amazing team of teachers and coaches.
So what year was that you signed up for the teacher training?
That was 2019. So not quite 2 years ago.
And when were you diagnosed with cancer the first time?
I was diagnosed in May of 2017 when I was 39 years old.
And did you go through, because I wanted to, I have watched Heal. Prior to Heal, Dr. Naisha Winters has been on the show twice, and we have a working relationship together, like to do more in the future and have her back on and do some other fun things. And one of the things that I recognized in working with Dr. Naisha and talking with her, all the things in Radical Remission are things that I've been involved in for 20 years. I've been the weird trainer who has told everybody that everything's emotional. I've been the person who has been trying to educate people on how much that what Dr. Naisha calls the terrain, I'm going to call it that energetic, psychological, behavioral understanding and your position in life and how you interpret things and how you either process or don't process emotions. Those things play a role because everything has to be an idea before it becomes a thing. And how we focus is how we talk to ourselves and the things that have happened to us. We have belief systems that cause us to feel things, and all of this energy creates things. And so I've been that person, and it's always interesting to me to kind of go back and go, okay, like as I'm reading Radical Remission, I recognize for a lot of people, especially because they're people who've been skeptical for a long time about all the things that I've been saying. I have a client who I worked with for 8 years who had back pain. And I said to him pretty early on, this is not structural. This is emotional. And while we are going to work on the structural things, we're going to do the core work. We're going to do the strengthening. We're going to do looking at the diet. We're going to look at your sleep. We're going to do all those things. But this is a repression of emotion. And until it is dealt with, it's not going to go away. And it took 8 years of working with him to get to the point where he got himself in the hospital with pneumonia. And then he listened to and watched a video I had sent 8 years prior when he just discarded it because I'm not a doctor. So he said, well, you weren't a doctor. So I just didn't really listen. And yes, I kind of thought you were crazy. And then something happened over the 8 years that it kind of hit him. And he went, oh. So then he did the things prescribed and his back pain went away. And he now totally understands and gets that if he has an inkling of it, that's an indication of something unprocessed that he needs to deal with. So now the door has been open, but it took 8 years. And I recognize for a lot of people out there, not necessarily my community, people who are listening to this podcast, most of them already understand the power of emotions in alternative medicine. But the rest of the world, let's say that the majority of the people out there have no idea because they trust in Western medicine so much. And it's what they're told. It's what they're bombarded with. It's the paradigm that we're used to, that you have cancer, you get chemotherapy, you get radiation, you listen to your doctor, you take the drugs. And yet there's always been this sort of cloud of, for me anyway, of looking at, well, what's the root cause of this? we're treating the symptoms, but what caused it in the first place? And while we may never be able to identify the exact cause for most people, we can make some assumptions based on patterns. And we can look at so many different factors to assess why, and then look at things that are out of balance. And again, sort of common sense things to me. I think radical remission is very common sense, right? I mean, there's some of this to me is, well, of course, if you walk around feeling like one of my teachers in the past gave a really great presentation, and she said, when you feel embarrassed, what happens? Your cheeks get red. When you feel fear, what happens? Your heart pounds faster. When you feel nervous, sometimes your stomach ties in knots. These are physical reactions to emotional things. These are literally things that anyone would agree with. Like if you get nervous, maybe you sweat, or maybe your stomach goes all weird, or your something in your body tightens up. When we look at that very basic tie to emotions, I think most people would agree or say, oh yeah, I've experienced that. But yet looking at long-term patterns of holding on to anger and resentment and fear and grief have the same effect, but somehow the majority of the population dismisses it when it comes to a bigger diagnosis. So I'd love to know, to go back to your diagnosis and your sister, and like, I want you to tell me a little bit more about your relationship to, again, the idea of Western medicine, of who you look to with your sister. Did you ever have any inklings or intuition that there was more out there that could be done? Or do you think this was just part of the path, obviously, that she was walking down? Or maybe what happened to her stimulated that curiosity in you, which then made you open to receiving when you heard about the movie Heal?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I want to say is, before I get into my personal story, just to comment on what you were saying about having been pushing with your clients all of these years about emotions. Yeah, that was for sure one of the most surprising things for me when I read the book. And I know Dr. Turner says the same. It was one of the most surprising things in her research that in the original 9 factors, only 2 of them were physical. Because when you get a diagnosis of cancer, the first question you have for your doctor is, what can I do? What should I eat? What should I do? What should I not do? But the conversations that you're going to have with your doctor are definitely all going to be based in anything that you can do physically. And quite honestly, most Western medicine doctors are going to tell you can't really do anything. One of the things I love the most about radical remission is Dr. Turner says, you can't give yourself chemotherapy, you can't give yourself surgery, you can't give yourself radiation, but you can do these things for yourself. And I love that. When my sister was diagnosed, I'll start off by saying that after my diagnosis, we discovered that our family has the MAC daddy of all genetic mutations, called TP53, which is where your tumor suppressor gene is actually turned off. So obviously science has told us, we know that every human body has cancer in it, but the immune system takes care of killing those cells and cleaning them up. The problem is when you have TP53 and you're missing that tumor suppressor gene, if the terrain is just so, then it really gives the cancer an opportunity to grow. In my sister's case, she was pregnant when her cancer was discovered. She was actually 8 months pregnant when they discovered it, and she had 2 babies at home. So most likely in her situation, hers was probably largely hormone induced from having children back to back, and probably the stresses of being a young mom with all of those kids. So to be honest with you, when I was helping to take care of her, I did have this desire to want to do more and want to find more, but I was young and I wasn't sure what to do. And I was also helping take care of her kids. And so I just went along with everything that the doctors were saying. And she actually was diagnosed and passed within 10 months. So I'm not sure when she was diagnosed if there was, as healthy of an opportunity for her to heal as there was for me, because her prognosis was so dire. Now, of course, if you read Radical Remission, you'll find out there are plenty of people in there whose prognoses were extremely dire and they did heal. So I guess that's not quite a fair statement. But in saying that, yeah, I would say that it left me feeling very helpless, that I wasn't able to do more. And maybe it also left a feeling in me that Western medicine wasn't able to save her. And so maybe I needed to look outside of what Western medicine had to offer. I began seeing my Chinese healer before I ever even saw an oncologist. So I began seeing a Chinese healer after my biopsy, my breast biopsy, but before I ever even met with a oncologist. And so it was really interesting when I met with him. He was very, well, it's fair to say he's fairly anti-Western medicine. And he explained to me that in Eastern medicine, cancer, they don't refer to tumors, they refer to blockages. And essentially, it is an energetic blockage in your body that is causing the cancer cells to accumulate. And he actually wanted me to get his treatments, and he wanted me to do things like go on a water fast and all of these things. And he said to me, give me 3 or 6 months of just letting me treat you, and then you can go back and get your scans. And I was scared. I was really afraid. That seemed very risky to me because I had lost my sister to cancer. And so I wasn't ready yet. I was obviously committed enough that I see him every single week and have for the last near 4 years. But I wasn't ready to say no to Western medicine all the way. And quite frankly, I still am not. I believe that for me personally, there's a place for both in my life. So I began seeing him. And as I mentioned, I began taking supplements. But I really did have to take a hard look at my life and the terrain that was created inside of my body that allowed the cancer to grow. And at the time, I was in a very unhappy marriage. My husband and I owned a couple of businesses together, a couple of bakeries. I was working 7 days a week. I wasn't able to see my daughter as much as I would like. I wasn't able to travel as much as I would like. I was just in it felt like a rat race. It felt like I was hopping on that wheel every single day with the same predictable outcomes. And so it took me a little while. It took me about a year to kind of unravel my life, but I absolutely imploded it. I closed my business. I got divorced. I did all of the emotional work that needs to happen to sort of reset the body. And it was amazing once I got out of the situation that I had been in before to look back and just how much sympathy I felt for that woman. That woman being me, just looking back and looking at the type of life she was leading and knowing that cancer was festering in my body. The fact that I was stage 4 on the day that I was diagnosed, that it was never even caught beforehand. It was pretty wild. But yes, in answer to your question, I think something was sparked in me as a result of losing my sister that kept me very open to it. I've also been a very intuitive person my whole life. I've always been very into dream analysis, and I've always believed in synchronicities and things like that. So I think generally speaking, I probably lean a little bit more towards someone who's going to be a bit more suggestible to these things. But with that said, over the last near 4 years, I've had several forks in the road, if you will, where I've had to make decisions where I have to ask myself, this is what my oncologist is saying, and does this resonate with me? Is this true to how I feel? And there are times that we've agreed, and there are times that we've disagreed. But I'm always working on, I guess, keeping in touch with my intuition, because if you've read Radical Remission, to me, intuition chapter is absolutely one of the most fascinating, specifically the studies that they reference where the body is aware of dangers and things like that before the mind ever is, well before. So I do think that, there's a balance between using your common sense mind, which sounds a little bit like your client that you mentioned earlier that had back problems. And then following your intuition and saying, is this what feels right for me?
Yeah, it's not cancer, but I had a quick story about fibroids for a long time, which to me was also, and I've been doing acupuncture and working in Chinese medicine for 20 years. So I, along with you, have been having treatments at least once a week. And sometimes, depending on what's going on, more times, or looking at, using Chinese herbs. I'm a big, big fan of Chinese medicine, but I had fibroids that weren't necessarily being treated properly. And I don't mean that by anybody else. It wasn't working. Like I was doing a lot of things, although they all led me to the next thing. Like everything in my opinion, builds off the next thing. So it's all important. It all plays a role. It all can teach you something. And for me, I had fibroids that were growing and I was told to have surgery, and I was told to have surgery by a healer, and a healer that I trusted. And so then, because I trusted her, I went to the doctor to talk about that, and I cried. And then I went back again and to another doctor and cried again. And on the third time, when I was bawling my eyes out because I was getting ready to make the appointment, I had to look at myself and say, what are you doing? You don't believe this. You do not believe that this is the answer. This is not the right answer. Otherwise, you would feel relief. And so from that point on, and I was doing all the things, and I was doing everything and anything. And I'd love to hear anything I didn't do when it comes to fibroids. And I did release one on my own. But there came a point in which I was just literally always listening to my body. I was doing everything I could that I was excited about trying, but I was also listening to my body. And my body told me when it was time. And I had met with a doctor who we talked about surgery, but there was another procedure. And at the time, that procedure, the uterine fibroid embolization, that procedure was a no-no. Like she said, well, if you ever want to get pregnant, then I wouldn't recommend it. So that was taken off the table, but that was the least invasive procedure that one could do. And I was like, okay, well, all right, I guess that's off the table. And then 2 years later, my intuition said, check it again. So I went onto the internet and I checked it out. And now it was the fertility preserver. All of a sudden, the studies had changed, and now everyone was saying, no, this is a great thing to do. So I called the doctor back and made an appointment to go in. I had this procedure done. The procedure that I worked with the doctor on, it was a different doctor. She wanted me to have hysterectomy. And I looked her straight in the face, not emotionally charged at all, because I've had a ton of doctors on the show. I've had Anita Morjani on the show. Hopefully Dr. Joe Dispenza will also be on the show, and Kelly Turner's coming on the show. So I've talked to enough doctors and people who've had these experiences and deal with these very specific things enough to know that I didn't need a hysterectomy. In fact, I looked at her, I said, yeah, that's not going to happen. And so then the next doctor, the gynecologist, she looked at me in the face and she said, you scare me. You make me nervous. And I said, so let's go down the line here. So you're taking this one thing and this 15% chance that could go wrong. Well, could it also go perfectly fine and everything could work out exactly the way that I'm laying it out? And she said, yes. I said, well, that's the way it's going to work out. And that's the way it worked out. So I am a huge believer in intuition. I teach an intuition course, a strengthening intuition course, because that is our, that at the end of the day, Western, Eastern, doesn't matter. What is your body telling you? What is your body saying yes to? And what is it? And what's your intuition telling you? And if we can't connect to that, because ultimately that's what's going to determine the right path, I believe, for people. But having the information, having the perspective, having the understanding of why. I was on a rollerblade this morning and I was thinking about another topic for a show about why. There's a fine line between wanting to be too controlling and understanding too much and being passive and not questioning enough. And I think that there are some people who question too much. They're control freaks and they don't trust. And then there's the ones that don't ask enough questions, that don't take control of their health. I've had Dr. Christian Northrup on twice, and our whole first conversation was around the marriage between medicine and intuition, and that we become that we're the only ones who can decide what's right for us. We're just gathering information and having guides of doctors and physicians and whoever else suggesting things. So whether it be Eastern or Western, someone can, like you said, you can check in and see, is this right for me? And your body will tell you if it's right for you. So when you look back at the emotional root, or so you said about the stress and the gene, and Dr. Bruce Lipton's been on the show also, and we talked about epigenetics and how how our epigenetics affects gene expression. And I know you said it was turned off. Do you have any idea? Have you ever thought about that your gene being turned off had anything to do with environmental belief systems or family heritage or anything like that?
No, to be honest with you, I haven't thought that. It is just an unfortunate genetic mutation that's quite rare. And you have a 50-50 shot of it being passed down in your family. And unfortunately, it's been pretty intense in my family. But no, I haven't questioned why we have the genetic mutation. I know it's been around for a while because if I look back at the family tree, I lost my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, when she was quite young in her 60s. And if you kind of look back on that side of the family, now, of course, this testing didn't exist. It has not existed for that long. So this is somewhat new to our family to have made that discovery. In other words, we didn't even know this when my sister passed, or obviously I wouldn't be in this situation because we would have been monitoring me.
Right. What other applications? So looking at the nine key factors that can make a real difference in radical remission, what do you think? Do you think the intuition was the number one for you, or what were like the top two or three that you implemented that you think helped you so much?
For me, I think releasing suppressed emotions was probably right up there with intuition. And I think when you're someone who is in an environment that's quite stressful, it becomes normal to you, if that makes sense. Like, it becomes normal that you work 7 days a week and you work 14 hours a day, because that's just kind of how it is. And in a way, you don't really realize what it is you're stuffing down emotionally, to reach a point where that lifestyle becomes normal, that stress level becomes normal. Being in an unhappy marriage, I really, really struggled with that. And I felt so strongly about not getting divorced. My parents are still married. They've been married for 50 years. And I have a daughter. And I really felt I shouldn't get divorced because of my daughter. And I had a friend who said to me, you know what, I think you're forgetting that you have an opportunity to teach your daughter a lesson as well, that it doesn't always make sense to be in a difficult marriage like that. And you can show her how strong you can be as a single mom and how amazing of a parent you can be. Coincidentally, that is the same friend that recommended the Heal documentary. So she's obviously an amazing friend. So yeah, I would say releasing suppressed emotions was a big one. And that is one I'm still working on constantly. There are times when all of a sudden I will just burst out into tears watching something or hearing something, and not even realizing that I was sort of holding on to that emotion. And when those things happen, I can't help but think about, in Eastern medicine, when they talk about blockages, all of those times in your life where you've maybe, stuffed down some type of experience. For me as an adult, unfortunately, I've had a fair bit of trauma. I lost my sister, my only sibling, at a young age. I lived in New York during 9/11. As I say, having a difficult marriage. Did have a wonderful childhood, but as an adult, I've sort of had my fair share of difficulties. And I think I tend to be a very strong type A person. And so it was always just push through, just keep on pushing through, without stopping and checking in and saying, well, what is just pushing through doing to my body? One of the things I absolutely love in the book that Kelly talks about, Dr. Turner talks about, is what she calls the waterfall analogy. And the way that we should really experience emotions like a waterfall. We should allow them to wash over us and to experience them in the moment, and then to essentially let them go. And I think that's been really helpful for me as a coping mechanism and strategy as well. For when, things don't go very well in my life, instead of hanging on to it and harboring resentment or asking why, or is this fair, just saying, okay, this is what I've just experienced. This is how it makes me feel, feeling it deeply, moving on and saying, all right, on to the next. Or maybe it means you go to bed and you start over with a new day the next day. But I want to get back to something you mentioned when we very first started speaking about the book being common sense. I could not agree with you more. And I think the other amazing thing about the book Radical Remission and the research that Dr. Turner did is that when you read the book, the first thing you think to yourself is, why does everyone not know this information? Because to some degree, while it is common sense, it's organized in such an incredible way, especially with the science behind it. But when you read the book, you can't help but think to yourself, geez, if everybody had a copy of this or were taught this material, they might not get cancer in the first place. And so I actually ended up gifting the book to a lot of friends after the fact who had no cancer. And I just said, I found this book to be life-changing, and I think it will be life-changing for you as well. And the feedback that I got from every single friend was exactly the same. And just what you said as well, like, wow, this stuff seems so common sense and so obvious, but it's just when when it's organized in that way. And for anybody who's listening who's not familiar with the book, basically Dr. Turner researched 1,500 cases of radical remission, those who had a spontaneous healing from cancer, who either didn't use Western medicine or Western medicine had already failed them, or they beat a very dire prognosis, which would be a less than 25% survival. And when she interviewed those people, she found that they all did different things. I think the list was like around 75 things that each person said they had done total, but they had all done the same 9 things. And actually in her subsequent book now, there's a 10th factor as well, exercise. So I do think it is incredible how if we were all to implement these 10 factors in our lives, how we would just be healthier, happier people in the first place. And the thing Dr. Turner is very careful to explain is this book is not a cure. If you have cancer and you read this book and you implement everything, it does not mean that your cancer is going to go away. However, there is scientific evidence to show that every single factor in the book does boost your immune system. And obviously, we know a boosted immune system is good for everything. It's good for just avoiding colds, quite frankly, I don't know, possibly even COVID right now. But just in general, it's really, really great material that is relevant to everyone, whether or not you've had a diagnosis.
I have an Empowerment Strategist certification, and it's going to be part of the curriculum because, of course, I want everyone who's listening right now to buy the book. I want you to listen to the book. I have all 3 versions. I have the Kindle, I have the book, the paperback, and I have the audio. So I'm not a big Kindle person. I know Kindles are fine, but I prefer to have a book in my hand. I want to be able to flip back the pages. I think seeing the words and reading the words sears it in my brain. I have like one of those photographic memories. And so I would prefer to look at it than just listen to it. I can retain a lot when I hear also, but it's more impactful if I can read it or go back and look at it. I remember listening to something in chapter 4. There was like a diagnosis of suppressed emotion. And I was like, oh, I need to have the book to look at that. So that's one of the reasons why I bought the book. So Radical Remission is, again, a general, I love all the stories and all the different cases that she outlines, because I think it gives hope to anyone in any situation when someone wants to say, well, no, that's not me. Mine was worse. I had a specific situation. There are so many great stories in the book. And I love, again, the range of them because, I think at the end of the day, why we're here, why you and I are here is because Dr. Naisha and I had this conversation on a Instagram live. We were promoting our last episode that we did on the metabolic approach to cancer. And she said to me at the end of our interview, which happened to be on her birthday, she said, JJ, if a patient feels disempowered, no treatment works. And that's when I kicked in. Hello, I'm an empowerment strategist, and my course for certifications coming up. And she's like, well, you're on the team. Because again, sort of beating there's the intuition part where we have it, and then people second guess you because you don't have the scientific proof. I'm the person that doesn't need it when I know it. Like the intuition is pretty high, and I'm like, no, this is truth. You don't need to prove it to me. But then there are so many people that need the proof. They need the scientific evidence to show that this actually works because they don't trust their intuition. No one's ever taught them how to. And what I do love about this book is it, like what you just said, it's all scientifically proven to strengthen immunity, and your life will be better, period. So I love that in Dr. Naisha's first show that we did, she talked about, I called the show Healing into Dying, because she said, you know what, I'm dying. I might as well figure it out and have a good journey on the way there. That was her approach. So let me learn something and do this the best I can. It wasn't even to heal herself. It was just to sort of do it well, understand it, and do it the best she could. And then, by default, boom. And Dr. Kelly did the intro to Metabolic Approach to Cancer. She wrote the foreword for Dr. Naisha. And that was when Dr. Naisha said, do you know Dr. Kelly Turner? And I had seen the movie Heal not too long after that conversation. But this is all, I just listened to this and it's like, yep. Nothing shocking me. And I'm like, yep. I'm glad more people are learning this. I'm glad someone's researching this. I'm glad someone's putting this on pen to paper and dealing with a community of people who sometimes feel like they're going to give up, or possibly, again, I had a doctor look at me and say, I'm going to do this procedure for you. Because I said to her, I don't even need to go over these slides. Just yes or no, will you do the procedure? Because if she was going to say no, I would have been on to the next person. And she said, I will do it, but it's not my first recommendation. My first recommendation is hysterectomy. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So to me, I was very, very sure and strong and secure. And my boyfriend was like freaking out. He's like, oh my God, are you going to die? I'm like, I'm not going to die. And not to, I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way. The first doctor that I saw that said about the procedure and not being able to do it and I should have surgery, or she actually said, you can just watch it for a little while and wait, because she told me I could actually probably get pregnant if I wanted to with the fibroids as they were. And I said to her, and I was very frustrated because in Western medicine, there's not that many options for fibroids and they are benign. So she's like, well, at least it's not cancer. And by this point, I've got Suzanne Summers' again, using all the same information, I was like, I have tools for cancer. Cancer doesn't scare me. I have tools. There's so much research on alternative medicine for cancer, like tons of it. And there's nothing for fibroids. And again, that wasn't me inviting cancer in. It's just the frustration that we have something that isn't life-threatening, but is still annoying. And again, women getting their uteruses taken out all the time when that's not necessary. And I thought, why did I have to go through this? And I think that the reason I had to go through this was so that I could come out the other side and still realize what's happening to a lot of people where they're being disempowered because they're being told to do something really dramatic that they probably don't need.
Absolutely. Empowerment is such a big piece of the puzzle. And, just taking control of your health and doing the research. I mean, PubMed is an incredible tool. And obviously, with care, the internet can be can be a useful resource when you're looking for other people's experiences. But yeah, I do think, I read an article years ago that was talking about the future of artificial intelligence with doctors. And somebody designed a computer system where you could input symptoms and it would spit out a diagnosis. And the artificial intelligence machine was spitting out a diagnosis with a 75% accuracy. And it said that the average doctor has about a 60% accuracy. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that is really scary because that's not really that far off from 50-50, is it? So kind of that always stuck in my head as well. And I have to say, I have amazing doctors whom I trust, and we have wonderful relationships where, we can talk about everything. And I tell them I just actually finished a water fast, my first water fast I've ever done. I want to try whole plant cannabis pills. I see a Chinese healer. I've kind of been one of those people to really throw everything at it and see what sticks. But you have to be careful because I'm very lucky that my oncologists will have those conversations with me, but there are other doctors who just won't, and who will flat out say to you, you're crazy. There's no point eating healthy. I mean, when you look at the average advice that a chemo patient is given, they're told to just go chug milkshakes and have apple pies and all of those things to keep calories in their body. When at this point, we know we have enough evidence to show that that type of eating is cancer promoting. So I think it's just always really important to understand that doctors are humans. They are wrong sometimes, many times, and many of them are not doing it from a place of intending harm for you. It's just that they haven't necessarily received the training. I have a lot of friends who are doctors who I've talked to about their training on nutrition, and it's essentially non-existent. I think it's like a day or maybe like a chapter in a book over the course of all of their medicine. And so they're trained to, just tell you what they know, which is find the problem and cut it out. As opposed to, as you said earlier, figuring out, well, what's the root cause? What brought this on in the first place? So I do think empowerment is a really big piece of the puzzle in knowing, and you'll remember that's what I said when I first read the book, I am a player. I am a player. I am here. I have an active role to take in healing myself. And that confidence is also really important. Just having that confidence and saying to yourself, and again, another factor in the book, having strong reasons for living, saying to yourself, I'm not ready to go yet. I have things I want to do. I'm a parent, or maybe it's a career change, or you want to get remarried, or, any one of those things. So it does really just require kind of digging deep and saying to yourself, I'm going to be my own advocate. I'm going to be empowered. I'm going to do the research that I need to do. And then I'm going to basically look at everything I have in front of me, what I've researched, what my doctor's telling me, and then maybe I'm going to let my intuition guide me to what the correct answer is.
Absolutely. And, and just to say, and I also don't necessarily believe everyone is supposed to survive. And that's not, I believe that we actually choose our life before we get here, before we incarnate. And so sometimes being a catalyst for someone else's growth is our whole purpose. So I don't actually believe that everyone's supposed to heal. But if they don't have a strong reason and they're ready to go, then they're ready to go. We're going to die anyway. And I don't believe this is our only life. But for the ones who have a strong reason, for the ones who know that there's something they can do about it, for the ones who are on that path of enlightenment, so to speak, or in that stage of their own expansion to say, yeah, I'm going to take my power back now. And this is leading me to, again, change my life in a way I wasn't willing. This was the catalyst for the growth I needed. This was the wake up call I needed, all those things. But this isn't a message. I just want to make sure everyone understands, and I'm clear that I don't think that anyone who doesn't make it, if you will, is like they did something wrong or that it was bad and everybody should survive. I think and most people who listen to my show understand that that's sort of the belief we come in with, is that we're eternal beings and that we don't actually ever die. We just recycle. So I want to know how you work with the Radical Remission Project. So are you coaching people? Are you counseling people? Like, how does that work?
Sure. Well, I am a certified teacher, which means that I can conduct radical remission workshops. I did not choose to become a coach because my feeling was that I feel I can impact more lives by working directly with Dr. Turner and working with the project, as opposed to being kind of an independent teacher or coach. So right now I am the director of content for the project. And really right now we are working on sort of our overall strategy of how we can reach the most people and sort of get the message out of what radical remission is. And I think ultimately what drew Dr. Turner to the work is she's a storyteller by nature. She actually studied film undergrad at Harvard. One of her passions is screenwriting. She's got, a film project, and she's writing a TV script and things like that. She's a storyteller. And what's so powerful about the Radical Remission book is that she allows people to tell their own stories in their own words. And that's really incredible. And obviously storytelling is, it's been around since the dawn of time. And so we really feel that that's what resonates the most. So for the past 5 years, the website has been collecting written healing stories. We've got a project coming up this year. We're actually going to be collecting video healing stories as well, because sometimes it's really wonderful to see a person's face and expression and hear their voice when they're talking about that. And, Dr. Turner had the documentary that came out last year on Hay House Media, and I think that'll probably be coming out at some point again. So right now we're really just focused on sort of reaching people and getting the word out. And then the last thing that we hope to wrap up sometime this year is that actually Harvard University is doing a multimodal pilot study on the radical remission factors. And this is the first traditional medical study that has ever looked at this many factors all in conjunction. And so basically for people who have signed up for a workshop, they can opt into the Harvard study, and they complete a series of questionnaires prior to the workshop, 1 month after the workshop concludes, and then again 6 months later. And it basically tracks to see their health and whether or not the factors made a difference in their life. And I have to tell you, to me, that is one of the most exciting things, because you clearly have had some frustration, as have I, with Western medicine. And at this point, if we can't beat them at the game, we got to join them. We got to link up with anyone in the medical community who is interested in learning more about this. And with that said, I'll just mention, I just went to, in November last year, a Dr. Joe Dispenza advanced workshop for a week. Which is something I had been wanting to do for a long time. It was literally a dream come true. And I ended up meeting in the elevator a heart surgeon. He's actually Italian born, but lived in Florida. A heart surgeon who, this was his 9th Dr. Joe conference. And throughout the conference, there were so many nurses and doctors who spoke up. Many of them who said, we are tired of basically the direction that things are taking and the lack of awareness that the mind body spirit connection has a lot to do with healing as well. And we are here because we want to learn more and we want to take the work forward. So one of the things at the Radical Remission Project that we will always be keeping an eye on is basically how the medical community is responding, because we know there will be a tipping point, right? At some point, Western medicine is going to have to take a look at this, because the number of people who are healing themselves, or at least contributing to their healing at a level that Western medicine is not addressing, has been anecdotal for years. But at this point, we're pushing past that. I mean, there are plenty of books and podcasts and all sorts of things about people who are beating the odds, and it's time we looked at that and asked why.
Well, that is very exciting. When you said that, I smiled big with both the Harvard study as well as the heart surgeon. And, in reading the Radical Remission finally, and really realizing that Dr. Nasha was sort of one of the first. I have other physicians that I work with and that are still in practice. Like Dr. Christian Northrup is not in practice, and Dr. Bruce Lipton is a researcher and he's not doing a practice. So, our doctors, Dr. Eben Alexander, not in practice anymore. But so I wanted to be able to work with people who were in practice and be a resource for them dealing with some of these emotional components, because it's literally, it feels like my life work to really focus on this, to take all the health education as a personal trainer and go through all the biomechanical things and the biochemical things and all the endocrinology things. And I work with a functional medicine doctor in a clinic, and knowing about bioidentical hormones and looking at everything, look at all the chemistry, looking at all the body, but then also adding in this spiritual and emotional component. So it's very exciting to hear that you guys are tracking that and that this Harvard study is happening, because that makes me smile. I know it's not about doctors being bad people. It's not about the system. It's the system is broken sometimes, based on, and people not asking again that question of, well, what else is there and why? And knowing that there are people who are saying, no, why? I mean, I've known for 20 years that doctors get 1 month, 1 week, 1 day of a nutrition in their education. So to finally have it be acknowledged that nutrition plays a huge role in our healing is great. I don't even care what they do. Actually, it's not even about anyone changing. It's about that as a community and as a society, that we're being educated and sharing, and not even being validated, but being acknowledged that there are other ways. And then people can choose what they want to do. If people want to do, I support people doing whatever they want to do. What I'd like to see more of is us sharing that these very basic things, that half of the stuff in this book are free. I mean, not that you working with somebody would necessarily be free, but you could radically change your diet and not have to pay somebody to help you do it, right? You can follow your intuition and learn how to do that with very simple practices to start, of meditation and things like that, which again would help you dramatically, not only improve your situation, but improve your experience of your life. And so that's what I'm really passionate about, is wanting to get out this information to more people, to really, again, go back to empowering them. You have the power, and you can work with others to figure out what to do about it. But ultimately, you're the creator of your own reality. And that's it. That's all there is. And so when we all understand that, I think that's such a positive, hopeful way to look at life. And that's sort of what I teach. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Everyone can go to radicalremission.com. I recommend everyone buy Radical Remission, the book, Surviving Cancer Against All Odds, the 9 key factors that can make a real difference. I believe I was told that the Heal movie was on Netflix and they just took it down. Do you know anything about that?
I do know. It's actually on Amazon Prime now.
Well, there you go. Everybody go watch Heal. Dr. Kelly Turner is on there, also with Joe Dispenza and Anita Morjani, and Bruce Lipton's on there, and there are a lot of great people. And please check it out. I believe, is it free on Amazon?
I think if you have Amazon Prime, it's free.
Okay, awesome. So no reason to stop anybody. Watch it, share it with your friends and family if they're open. Buy Radical Remission. I also am going to be gifting many copies of this book, radicalremission.com. Tara, this has been amazing. I really appreciate you coming on the show today and starting this conversation with my community on Radical Remission.
Thank you so much, JJ. And I'm so heartened to hear that this is something that you've been pushing for 20 years. I wish I had met you 15 years ago when I was going through my sister's cancer. experience. It's just so good to know that there are people out there who are really sharing this message, and we're grateful for you to give us the platform. And one thing I just want to mention about the book real quickly. So I bought the book originally, and then at some point I ended up buying the audiobook. And for anybody who likes audiobooks, it's actually read by Dr. Turner. And she puts so much emotion in her voice when she shares the stories of the radical remission survivors that you almost feel like you're getting a sense of those people. So if you're a person who likes audiobooks, I definitely recommend that one.
I do too. I am enjoying the audiobook very much. I just want to hear all this wonderful stuff that I could be writing and sharing and quoting. It's when I went out and bought the book because I thought, no, I need to go.
Yep.
I need to look at that word, whatever that word is, the diagnosis of repressed emotion is, because I want to share that. Because here's, again, all of the past clients that I've had over 20 years who think I'm crazy because, again, my intuition knew without a shadow of a doubt that all these things existed and were true. But I wasn't the person who needed to research it to prove it. I wanted to attract other people who intuitively knew it was true. And now I'm really appreciative that other people more and more are sharing the scientific research to convince other people, or at least just show them that they have options. That's all I care about, is that we all have options, and that, again, at the end of the day, you're the creator of your own reality. So thank you so much again, Tara.
Absolutely. Thank you, JJ.